Hello everybody, it's Matt, and we're here to review Godrick's Great Axe, the colossal weapon in the game Elden Ring, and we're going to see basically how good this, or bad, this axe is. Now, it scales kind of strange, and here as you can see, I didn't have anybody drop it for me, so I am defeating Godrick the old-fashioned way with a level 1 weapon. And I'm doing that to obtain his axe and then use it for the rest of the game to carry me. Now, going to talk a little bit about scaling on the weapon. It has a very, very weird equal scaling between strength and dexterity, and that, in my opinion, kind of makes it a downer. Now, there are some pluses to this weapon, as you will see as we go on here, and there's going to be some really, really, really good parts about it. But it also fails in many other categories. And this is my run with Godrick's Great Axe, and the question will be answered: can you beat Elden Ring with Godrick's Great Axe? And the answer is yes, you can. You can beat the game with most things, to be honest. But in this case, this axe is not terrible. It has a pretty good jump attack. It has a little bit of a lack of stagger that you're going to see, and that is disappointing to me because I'm not really a colossal weapon user, and as somebody who, you know, is kind of new to bigger weapons, I expected more stagger, and you're going to see in some of these boss fights going forward that the stagger rate is actually pretty low, as in you may do 10 jump attacks and get 1 stagger, which is just not great. Anyway, yeah, beaten with a level 1 katana because, you know, you got to take Godrick down and he's not too hard. Okay, so you have different moves with the axe. You have your basic 3 attacks, and then you're going to follow up with being able to block, and then you have your hammer down shatter, which we're going to talk about in a minute because it's kind of useful and useless at the same time. And then you have the unique R2 is really kind of cool, but it's also slow, and you know, your heavy jump attack as well. So I wanted to start the video with just a view of going to get the golden scarab, because you're kind of always going to need the golden scarab because it gives you 20% more runes, so why would you not, you know, want to go grab that? So this is kind of where I started. I had footage from the Red Wolf and Renala, however you say her name, as well as I believe the Magma Worm and such, but it was just so boring and so easy to get through. It really wasn't a challenge. My weapon was, I think, +4 by then, and it went kind of fast, and I didn't want to make this video overly long, so instead we kind of just move on into various fights. Okay, so the next one here that we're going to look at is how it handled against the Draconic Tree Sentinel. Okay, so the Draconic Tree Sentinel, he's actually he can be really tough because he's hard hitting, but his swings are really easy to dodge. So as you can tell here, I believe throughout the whole duration of this fight I only got hit once, and the axe actually handled him quite well. I believe it actually even staggered him multiple times throughout this fight. He has a weird stagger. He doesn't really like go on the ground or anything. He kind of just backs off, and you can kind of hear it based on the noise of the stagger. And as he got staggered multiple times, he did take good damage, and that fight went pretty well. Okay, so now we're here with the onboard scaling. As you can see, the upgrade starts. It turns strength from a D to a C very quickly, but then it turns around and it's going to eventually turn dexterity from a D to a C as well, and you're going to be C and C in dexterity and strength. So if you're going to put your strength all the way up to 60, which many people are going to do, you're going to have to put points into dexterity too, which is really awkward, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. So going forward and trying to beat the game with the axe, we have Godfrey, Golden Shade. I was a little bit under-leveled for this fight, so I kind of got beat up the first couple of times. It took me roughly around maybe 3 times to handle this fight because, in all honesty, it was a little rough because he was hard-hitting. He has the same basic combo attacks, but you got to get in a jump attack, wait out your turn, and at the end of the day, he's going to go down. So I just kind of showed the end of this fight, as I will with many of them, because I don't want this to be overly long. But overall, at this point in the game where I'm at, I was looking at the axe and kind of saying, okay, this is pretty good. But once again, I'm finding an issue with using the weapon special ability, okay? The weapon special ability does not really have hyper armor. Only has a little bit of hyper armor on the first stomp. After that, anything will stagger you. I mean, a little arrow from the distance that would normally do like, I don't know, 10 damage might actually stagger you. You have less armor seemingly than you normally do. It's really strange, and I'm not sure what they were thinking. And again, as the video goes on, you're going to see some interesting things here with how it can kind of mess up like certain NPCs and stuff. But as far as boss fights goes, it's actually not that useful. And obviously we took down Golden Shade after just 2 or 3 tries, and then the next up would be Morgott. Now, the fight with Morgott was actually kind of challenging because he's fast, and I'm not used to using colossal weapons. However, this colossal weapon actually swings a little faster than some of the other ones. It's not too terrible in terms of what it can do. So it's actually, to be honest, it's kind of manageable in faster fights. But again, you're going to be using a lot of the jump attacks. You're going to be using a lot of just basically getting in there, hitting him hard, and kind of getting out, because that's the majority of what we want to do here. And we will use some NPC summons here as well as spirit summons throughout, because though we're personally beating the game with the Great Axe throughout the entire thing, won't be using anything else. I do believe in using what the game gives you, especially if you want to have a little bit of fun on the run too, and test the weapon art in boss fights. You certainly will never ever be able to use this weapon art if you are alone in most boss fights, because you're just going to get whacked. You're going to get hit. If you can tank the hit, then that's great, and you can take the risk, but especially before grabbing the Shard of Alexander, its damage isn't really worth the potential of you just getting, you know, knocked on your ass. It's really not worth it. Okay, so as the fight went on, Morgott actually not too difficult, nothing too crazy here. The Great Axe is actually pretty good up until this point. It's pretty good for the capital. It's pretty good for the Atlas Plateau. It's pretty good for the lakes. It's obviously great for Limgrave. It really didn't start to struggle until roughly the time of the Fire Giant, I believe, was actually when I noticed that it had its significant weaknesses was against the Fire Giant. But here against Morgott, the fight goes on, and it's a pretty awesome fight, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. And I always enjoy the fight with Morgott, because fighting Morgott it's probably the first real boss fight in the game. And what I mean by real boss fight is it takes it up to the next level. Everything before that is pretty readable, pretty on the slower side. Not too crazy, and then you get to Morgott and things are just intense. Okay, so next up I found a use for the weapon art. I hadn't even realized this, but apparently you can use this weapon art on these legs, and it will take almost all the pieces off the front of them and occasionally the back of them. If you hit each leg pretty much once with this weapon art, the thing is coming down. And it was actually kind of funny to find that. I was like, oh cool, it actually has use. Anyway, here's the end of the Fire Giant fight. Okay, so the end of the Fire Giant fight here isn't really too epic. I did use Alexander because I was looking forward to getting the Shard of Alexander, because I wanted to make the weapon art as viable as possible. The Fire Giant only took 2 tries. The first try I kind of just messed up, I misread something. The second try I handled fine. Like I said, I had Alexander with me, which helped, and he went down pretty quickly. It wasn't too bad in the end. Okay, so we're going to switch to the fight with Mogh here. Okay, so Mogh is always easy for me because I've farmed Mogh a lot. So I think I got him on like the 2nd try, and I was substantially under leveled. The reason I went and did Mogh is actually to just basically get a whole bunch of levels, because if you use the Golden Scarab, you're going to get around 500,000. If you use, I think, a Pickled Foul Foot or whatever they're called on top of the Golden Scarab, I believe it's 655,000. So it's a lot of levels just to give you to kind of get ahead in the game without having to go back and, you know, farm stuff like shoot the bird over and over and over again. We can just go kill Mogh, and we got him on the 2nd try, and I don't even think I had the Lord of Bloods purify thing, whatever it's called. I almost called it the other thing, the bleed talisman. But yeah, I didn't really have that. I just kind of went in, I did my own thing, I got him on the second try. Mogh was never really difficult for me. He hits like a tank, but he's really slow, and he gives you good openings. You just have to wait, you have to be patient, and at the end of the day, if you're patient and you wait, you're going to be able to get in attacks. But once again, you'll see here, a lot of it is just me jump attacking repeatedly, because that's what this weapon is turned into. You're not going to use the weapon art on Mogh. If you had the thing to protect you, you could technically use the weapon art probably 2 times while he's phasing, but it really wouldn't help you that much because he's healing anyway, and without the Shard of Alexander, it does about, I think at this time my weapon was between +7 and +9, I can't remember for sure, but I think it was doing 1500 on the last slam, which for bosses isn't really that great. So it wasn't, you know, killing it, that's for sure. But the fight with Mogh was pretty epic. It got me a lot of levels in the end, and that was the important part. Okay, so now some regular enemies in the weapon art here. You're going to see where it kind of excels. It excels in the sense that the weapon art in general can be used on multiple enemies around you to stagger them. As long as you don't get hit, you can pretty much stagger them through and through, slam in the ground, and kind of just break them up and beat them up. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. It makes the weapon art a really good time. And once again, I was waiting to get the Shard of Alexander. It is really a shame that you have to get it very, very late, but it is what it is. Anyway, next up is the Godskin Duo. Okay, so the Godskin Duo, I summoned for this fight, but this is another one that's not really ever challenging for me. Even if I were to do it on my own or with a Spirit Ash, I don't really find it that difficult. The jump attacks did a lot of damage to them. I wasn't really able to do the weapon special much though, so that was a little disappointing. Okay, so I tried something weird with Alexander because I didn't care whether or not he killed me, because I could have just gotten back here in literally 1 minute once the elevator's open. And it worked. It shows its highlights against NPC attacks, and this is one where it really shows. He staggered me, I got greedy, but it didn't really matter. That hit would have staggered a lot of things actually, because that's more or less his special attack. It really does stun. But as you can see, I took him down with relative ease. Now Maliketh, wow, that was just, God, this probably took like 10 tries. It was by no means easy. This was not something that was too much fun in that regard. It was a little bit of a mess. I recorded the end of it, and man, it is very hard to get him with slower weapons. I don't know if there are people out there that are really good at this kind of thing and they could just come in and stop him, but for me, I had to keep my distance. I had to kind of back off and more or less take my time and wait for the right openings and hope that I didn't get debuffed too many times so that he ended up completely, you know, destroying and killing me. And as you can tell in this fight, I got beat up a whole bunch of times, but at the end of the day, you know, you're able to bring him down. And the Great Axe once again shows that it's pretty good. It's pretty good in certain circumstances, but again, it's not great. We're going to give the final review of it at the end here because, like I said, it has a very, very weird scaling with the whole C and C thing. But I think when you have scaling that is strength and dexterity, and you have it equal on both sides, where you're actually putting points into dex and having it go up damage-wise as much as it would in strength, you're losing out points that you may want to put in faith or intelligence as a secondary stat. And I don't mean as a full secondary stat, because obviously like your vigor and stuff and mind is going to be secondary, but I mean as that extra stat, which would have really helped me towards the end of the game, because had I been just a pure strength build, I probably would have put some points into faith, so I had the Lord's Fortification at the end, which would have helped me, and any spirit summon that you use, protect yourself 65% against the holy damage at the end, which really, really, really helps at the end of the day. Okay, so Gideon was a joke. Not hard at all. Pretty sure the weapon art was pretty much made for him. Kind of walked in and just beat the crap out of him, so to speak. It really wasn't a challenge. Honestly, if I had a little more mind and a little more stamina, I'm pretty sure I could have just weapon arted it all the way through, and he would have barely gotten out of his monologue, which most of the time you fight this guy, he's not going to get past his monologue. He's really not that good. If the only times you'll ever get killed by Gideon is if, for some reason, you can get killed if you stand in front of him and he uses that retaliation thing at the same time he spams something and he happens to get it off. He might one-hit you because he has some pretty good, strong magic attacks, but once again, not too challenging. And we're on to Godfrey and Hoarah Loux. So this fight was where things got really intense. I wasn't too worried about this one. I was worried more so about the Elden Beast and Draconic, or however you say his name. And I wasn't too worried about this one because this is actually one of the most fair and balanced fights in the entire game. So it wasn't going to be too bad. It wasn't going to be that bad running in here, and you know what? Godrick's axe, it handled it fine. I mean, for Godrick, his weapon was acceptable here. And then, you know, he turns into Hoarah Loux, and obviously he speeds up as Hoarah Loux, and it makes things a little bit more complicated because he's a lot faster, and he's got grapple attacks and stuff, but I did use a Spirit Summon for the fight. I don't think I used Nepheli for this one. I'm recording over it and kind of watching gradually. Also, sorry if my voice sounds weird. I have a minor cold at the moment. Anyway, yeah, I just used the Spirit Summon and went in and kind of fought him, and it wasn't too bad at all. It wasn't anything, like, you know, ridiculously crazy. I hadn't used Quiche yet, but I was saving her use for the final fight because I knew I was going to need her for that. I didn't want to go into the final fight with a weapon that I had to just jump attack, and I knew I wasn't really going to get the weapon art off on. And once again here, the weapon art does not shine. It shows again that it's kind of not viable. And when I went in the first time, and I believe I got Godfrey on the second or third time, but the first or second time I died, I didn't even count it because I had walked in and actually attempted to use the weapon art on various occasions. I tried to find a way to see if I could use the weapon art, but at the end of the day, it's just not possible. Okay, so we get to the Elden Beast. I'm going to skip the fight before this because it went kind of quick with Quiche. It always does at the end of the day. She's really good, especially in the first part. But in the second part, as you can see, eventually she's going to die here, and it's going to be me and the Elden Beast. And I'm going to finish him off with the Great Axe. And the Great Axe is kind of fun in this fight because the jump attacks do a lot of damage, but once again, it has a lack of stagger. I don't think I staggered the Elden Beast once. And before this, I had one stagger on Radagast, but overall, the stagger rate, really not great for a colossal weapon. I wasn't enjoying that. Between that and the weapon art and the strange scaling, I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is, can you beat the game with Godfrey's axe? Yes, you can. You can beat the game with Godfrey's axe, you bet. But, would you want to? I'm not so sure you would want to be honest. It's really not that fun. Some of the parts of this run were fun. It was more of a challenge run, but having a weapon art that's just not viable, that you just can't use for most situations, in a game where so many weapon arts are just a blast and just fun, and you have a good time using them, it's just frustrating, to say the least. And I found, you know, using the weapon art on regular enemies or NPCs, invaders and stuff actually worked quite well, but using the weapon art on bosses with this weapon is just not, it's not viable. You get touched in any way, shape, or form, they hit you, they clip you, anything, and you are going to stagger right out of it. That first stomp has a little bit of hyper armor. After that first stomp, you have no hyper armor. I'm pretty sure you actually have less posture after that than before. But anyway, can you beat the game with Godfrey's axe? Yes, you can. And I'm going to leave it on this note to end this video. If you like videos like this, let me know, and I can make more of them and work on different runs, as I would love to do that. That would be a lot of fun. But this one, it was okay. I hope everybody has a great day. Bye.